know, and he wouldn't.
September 4th.
Your flawed decision. McCain over the years, and he was given a chance to rescind those statements today, just a few minutes ago, as you know, and he wouldn't. The issue in the 2018 going to the American military cemetery in France, that's BS. Every one of the leaders who were there, the leader of Germany, leader of France, leader of Canada, other leaders, they drove to honor U.S. Marines for what they did in World War II. Him taking almost $4 billion out of defense contracting monies that were going to build schools and hospitals and facilities for the American troops and their families. I mean, a whole list of things that he has done to debase our military. And, you know, watching this day after day, if it wasn't so serious, Jim, it'd be like a clown show. It'd be like a daily clown show. You know, I saw Bill Cohen's comments earlier in the last hour with you when he talked about how the United States has fallen in the eyes of the world, how we have, post-World War II, been a leader. We've been respected for our values, our morals. We haven't done anything right. We've made a lot of mistakes. But everybody knew they could count on us. They could count on a president who said the right things, although we all disagree with different actions. But we lost that. And I think that's the bigger story here. And then what this does, this Atlantic story, it focuses on the debasement of our veterans, of our men and women who give of themselves to this country. I mean, it's really astounding.
And I sense the passion coming out of your voice. We heard the same from the former Secretary William Cohen. What is it about this story? What is it about this subject that so concerns people in the military community, people like yourself? And concern is not really a strong enough word. You get the sense that there are people in the military community who are just outraged by the president's behavior and what has been reported in the Atlantic magazine.
Well, Jim, part of my reaction is not just as the former Secretary of Defense, the leader of our armed forces in America and a former United States Senator, but more to the point, I am a veteran myself. My brother Tom and I served together in Vietnam in 1968. We served with, met the finest people we've ever known in our lives, their families, everything they represent. That's where I start. But then to your more general question, he has used the military for 3.5 years, used them as props in his campaigns. And every time he announces something, he's always used them as props. What he did in Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago when he brought in an airborne division camped outside of Washington, D.C. Everything he uses our military. He uses our people. He uses our tradition in the military of service. I don't know if every one of those comments in that Atlantic magazine was correct. I don't know. I would say this about those who evidently made those comments, that Mr. Goldberg, who is a very respected journalist, and I know him, it is their time now. It is their time now to step forward and use their names. I mean, quit enabling this guy. Come on, show some courage. Do you have any courage at all? It's easy to say things when it's anonymous. Nobody's using your name. Not so easy when you have to step out front. Now is the time to do this. Or I fear another 4 years. Not only what he's doing to our military, but what he's doing to this country.
All right, former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel calling out those sources who spoke to Jeff Goldberg in the Atlantic magazine to come forward and say what they know. Secretary Hagel, some strong comments tonight. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir. Just ahead, Joe Biden is emotional. Thank you very much. New interview to CNN will bring you much more right after a quick break.
CoQ new fears about that fire threat. And when we come back, the desperate search in Beirut after the possible sign of life in the rubble. And with jeopardy set for its return, news of
40s. Aberdeen, mid to upper 80s for Saturday and Sunday. You too will be seeing some of the rain on Monday and Tuesday, and then we'll gradually warm back up throughout the duration of next week. But again, notice it will be certainly much colder. And in Pierre, 90s for Saturday and Sunday, only the 60s on Labor Day itself. Rain coming your way. That
context then is portrayed. Josh, how does this play and the political impact of it?
Well, here's the big picture. This is not the first time that there have actually been documented videotaped comments of the president making insensitive comments about military service. You mentioned the John McCain, derision back in 2015, but we all remember the 2016 campaign when he attacked the Gold Star parent, Khizr Khan, which became a major issue in the campaign. And Jim Mattis wrote an op-ed on the record that really condemned the president for using the military and military service inappropriately at times. So, politically, a lot of this is baked in. We know, I don't think it's surprising. This may be shocking, these quotes, these anonymous quotes. They're not surprising to a lot of people who have followed the president. Politically, they tend not to move the needle, though I would note that there was a Military Times poll that came out this week that actually showed the president trailing Joe Biden by 4 points with military servicemen, a big reversal from what we saw in 2016 in the same poll. So there may be some movement. This story may be making a lot of people rethink their assumptions.
Clearly, the Biden campaign jumped on this quickly. There's an ad already. Joe Biden came out, talked to the press, was very mad, passionate about his response, but caveated, saying, if true, about these statements. I was struck in that appearance with the reporters, Steve, about some of the questioning, really all of the questioning. Here's just a sample.
When you hear these remarks, suckers, losers, recoiling from amputees, what does it tell you about President Trump's soul and the life he leads?
I wonder if you worry that this kind of language that comes from the President of the United States could deter some Americans who are tuning into him to not wear masks.
You said today is the angriest you've been as a presidential candidate. And there are a lot of people out there who are supporting you or are inclined to not vote for the president who would say, why isn't Joe Biden angrier about all of this?
If I did a matchup of questions at the White House briefing every day and those questions, it's pretty stark.
Yeah, it's very stark. I mean, look, this is an opportunity. Joe Biden hasn't subjected himself to media scrutiny very often. When he does, I would think reporters would want to take advantage of him and ask him pointed questions about his policy preferences, about the things he's setting out to do for the country, about the arguments he's made against.
And I wrote a beat for you, Ari.
What does that mean?
It's you like rap. I wrote a rap. Okay, so I'm sitting in my chair. I'm rocking back and forth. I'm here with Ari. Vote.
Oh, okay. So, you know what? There are artists who do this.
Anonymous sources, but not for other people who are trying to get to the truth. I think that there's a real debate to be had about the use of anonymous sources, but I don't think the use of anonymous sources should be dependent on whether it benefits Democrats or Republicans. It should be dependent on what we think about the use of anonymous sources journalistically.
Yeah,
I think.
But I guess let me just point. We ran Jennifer's part and we talked to her about it and what exactly she's reporting. They were not in the room on the decision about going to the cemetery or not. John Bolton was there and obviously wrote a negative book about the president, and he was on camera today answering our questions about it. I mean, kind of that does have a different look at it since he was in the room.
Yeah, very important. He said he was in the room when the decision was made, and he didn't hear the president say that. He also told the New York Times that he wasn't around the president all day, and it's possible the president may have said these things at a different part of the day. So I think it's an open question. Look, I don't know whether the story's true. I don't know whether these people said these things. I don't think anybody knows whether these people said these things, except for the people who are making the accusations. I think it's important to point that out.
No, I agree. Molly.
Yes, we have actually now, I think we're up to 10 people speaking on the record with firsthand knowledge that the story is not true. And we do have anonymous sources saying otherwise. They're definitely talking to reporters. The issue is one person talking to these people can't confirm another report because you don't know if the people you're talking to are the same people who gave that information to the first report. So that's why we want to...
It is a new phase. I think, you saw Biden go to Kenosha. You saw Biden have a press conference today responding to the Atlantic article and to talk about the economy. I think they're trying to get the vice president out there and Kamala Harris out there in a safe way. They're not going to be having large rallies. They're going to be encouraging people to wear masks. But I do think they believe that voters do want to see you in their state or make the effort in one way or another to get out there and show that they really want their votes.
Well, CBS, beautiful. Thank you, Steve. We'll be right back.
Audacious and arrogant. He tried and he beat a very popular Republican incumbent.
We met Houston mother Esbeti Reyes, diagnosed with the virus at 26 weeks into her pregnancy. When you found out that you had COVID and we know you're pregnant, what did you think?
It was very hard because last year I had a miscarriage in November. I was 4 months pregnant and I had a miscarriage. So the first thing that came to my mind was my baby.
Esbeti hospitalized for nearly 2 weeks in intensive care at Memorial Hermann. What was the toughest moment for you?
The first 3 days in ICU. Like, I could move my arms, but I couldn't move my legs. My body was giving up on me. I was so weak.
Luckily, she received a plasma treatment that may have helped her beat the virus, but her recovery would be long.
When I got home, I was still weak. It's like you're teaching yourself how to walk again. Everything frightened me.
Esbeti, already a mom of 2, kept fighting, beating COVID, and thanking her doctor. He's probably watching this. What would you tell him?
That you saved my life and my baby's life.
And then just last week, she was ready, going into labor and delivering a baby girl.
Say hi, Ari.
Aria Moore, weighing in at 6 pounds, 9 ounces.
Beautiful, strong, she's mine.
Esbeti today telling us her little daughter is a warrior.
She has a purpose. There's a reason why she survived all of this. And she's going to be someone in life.
And today, sending a message to other pregnant moms who might be battling COVID-19.
Keep fighting. Don't give up. Do not let the disease take over you. This is my little angel, my little warrior, my soldier, my reason for fighting when I was so sick.
A great message. We are so happy for Esbeti and baby Ari. And a big thanks to those doctors and nurses who helped her every step of the way. Thanks so much for watching tonight. I'm Tom Llamas. Have a safe Labor Day weekend. Good night.
Are you ready for a new season of dancing?
The First Alert Weather Team is working around the clock, looking ahead to
actually is.
Many Americans come to Washington, D.C. to see the Washington Monument. And what are we going to do? Put it in Portland? I mean, come on.
I want football back. By the way, are you watching? I want football.
I've never heard the president use the language that assertedly is said in that article about him calling military suckers and losers.
He can't come back to New York. He better have an army if he thinks he's going to walk down the street in New York.
That in America, we don't tear down the past, we celebrate our heroes, we preserve our history, and we build the future.
1 week covering Washington. My week continues. This weekend, I'll be hosting Fox News Sunday, and for
Sees Lester Holt. Take a look.
I think he'll win another term as president.
So Donald Trump will do anything and everything within which to win. And I believe that includes manipulating the ballots. I believe that he would even go so far as to start a war in order to prevent himself from being removed from office. My biggest fear is that there will not be a peaceful transition of power in 2020.
tonight, the firestorm over President Trump and the troops. The president denying a bombshell report. He called America's fallen service members, quote, losers and suckers. Our correspondent inside the Oval Office asking the president, does he owe an apology? And Joe Biden calling the alleged remarks disgusting and evoking his late son, saying when Beau Biden served in Iraq, he was no sucker. And the network exclusive with Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer.
I believe that he would even go so far as to start a war.
What he says a president would do to stay in power. Protesters and police clashing after that video of police restraining Daniel Prude, who later died. The police union now defending the officers. The man suspected of shooting a Trump supporter in Portland, killed in a hail of gunfire. The interview with his final words. The dire new warning this Labor Day weekend. Over 400,000 COVID deaths projected by January. New fears holiday crowds may trigger another surge. Our NBC News exclusive, behind the scenes with the TSA, their new security upgrades. And in the same boat, the unlikely team-up inspiring America.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, I'm Jose Diaz-Balart in for Lester Holt. We begin tonight with the firestorm for President Trump over comments he's accused of making about America's fallen heroes. The president today forcefully denying a report that he called service members killed at war losers and suckers. His opponent, Joe Biden, calling the alleged remarks disgusting and demanding an apology. Our Peter Alexander was in the Oval Office today and asked the president about the controversy.
President Trump tonight firing back after that explosive report alleging he made disparaging comments about military members.
Sir, do you need to apologize to service members and veterans?
No, it was a fake story written by a magazine that was probably not going to be around much longer.
The president responding to the Atlantic report that he rejected a 2018 trip to an American cemetery in France, saying, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers," and calling the Marines buried there suckers for getting killed. The story cites 4 people with first-hand knowledge, but does not name them, and NBC News has not independently confirmed the details. The White House says the trip was scratched because bad weather made it unsafe for Marine One to fly. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, now a Trump critic, was on the trip and said he didn't hear him make the comments. Tonight, Joe Biden, whose late son Beau served in Iraq, with this furious response.
When my son volunteered and joined the United States military as the Attorney General and went to Iraq for a year, won the Bronze Star and other commendations, he wasn't a sucker.
Condemning the president's reported comments.
Who the heck does he think he is?
The president has made derogatory comments in public on camera about service and sacrifice in the past. Candidate Trump attacking John McCain, a former Vietnam POW who lost the 2008 presidential election.
So I never liked him as much after that because I don't like losers. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
The president last night falsely claiming he never called McCain a loser, while taking credit for approving ceremonial honors for McCain's funeral. President Trump today under pressure praising all those who serve.
There's nobody that considers the military, and especially people that have given their lives in the military, to me, they're heroes.
And Peter joins us now from the White House. Peter, the president also under fire today from his former lawyer.
Yeah, Cohen, sorry, Jose, that's right. Michael Cohen is a fierce critic of President Trump, who he worked for years, now set to publish a new book. He spoke today with Lester.
Do you think he'll win another term as president?
So Donald Trump will do anything and everything within which to win. And I believe that includes manipulating the ballots. I believe that he would even go so far as to start a war in order to prevent himself from being removed from office. My biggest fear is that there will not be a peaceful transition of power in 2020.
The White House tonight says Michael Cohen's book is fiction and that Cohen readily admits to lying routinely. Jose?
Peter Alexander at the White House, thank you. And you can see more of Lester's
claim that he stopped travel from certain countries and that prevented widespread death in the United States. The president, though, did not dig into questions about what could be done now to save lives, including things like wearing masks, which, as you noted, he criticized Joe Biden for last night. The president quickly pivoted to talking about other countries, claiming yet again that other countries are cooking the books when it comes to their coronavirus numbers, not specifying any country. In the past, he has insinuated that South Korea, an ally of the United States, is, again, without evidence, fibbing with their coronavirus numbers. The president saying he doesn't want to embarrass anyone, so he didn't mention any country specifically by name.
Thanks, Scott. Look forward to it. Well, people are flocking to Huron for the South Dakota State Fair. The 5-day event started yesterday and runs through Labor Day. Cumberland's Kelly Volk was in Huron today and introduces you to one family experiencing the State Fair for the first time.
The fair is a part of life for the Moe family.
Skip the fair? That's like unreligious or something. I'm not sure.
On a typical year, you'd find this Brainerd family at the Minnesota State Fair exhibiting livestock. Instead, Steve and Becky Moe and their daughter Athena, who's an SDSU student, are in Huron today.
There aren't any state fairs in Minnesota this year, so we had to check it out.
I really enjoyed the atmosphere here. I really think there's a lot of great people, and all of the stands have been really, they're good stuff to look at, and I enjoy walking through the barns and looking at all the livestock.
It's the family's first time coming to the South Dakota State Fair.
People are just looking for a reason to get out and spend time with family and friends and make new friends, and the fair is the perfect venue for that. And
while State Fair manager Peggy Bash says attendance is expected to be down this year, she was pleasantly surprised on opening day.
I really think we're going to see our numbers increase.
While the State Fair outing looks a little different this year for the Moe family, their long-standing tradition continues.
We're super happy to be here, to just be experiencing a fair.
In Huron, Kelly Volk, KELO News.
And tonight's grandstand entertainment is bull riding. For a full list of the State Fair events and attractions, click the link under this story on KELOLAND.com. One thing that you won't see at the fair this weekend is the U.S. Senate debate. It was scheduled between incumbent Republican Senator Mike Rounds and Democratic challenger Dan Allers Saturday. However, the senator's wife, Jean Rounds, is undergoing an unexpected surgery at Mayo Clinic today. She had a routine appointment this week, and doctors discovered cancerous cells. They are in the same location where her original cancer was located.
Well, this holiday weekend is one of the last busy travel times of the summer. And while the pandemic may keep some people at home, AAA still expects drivers to make their way to various destinations. KELOLAND's Sarah McDonald explains why more people may be hitting the road.
If you're planning on traveling this weekend, you can probably expect the roads to be busy.
A lot of times there are some schools that won't be starting until after Labor Day. And of course those people want to get out and, take a little road trip before everyone settles into school and work.
While the pandemic has taken a toll on travel, Buskell says there are people who are wanting to travel to places where they can be outdoors and social distance, like state and national parks.
We don't see people wanting to go to theme parks or anything like that. It's more like national parks, the Badlands, the Rockies, Yellowstone, Detroit Lakes.
She says South Dakota has plenty of options for being outdoors. Additionally, it's important to take extra precautions due to COVID-19.
Buskell says you may want to consider planning ahead by packing snacks, hand sanitizer, and masks so you don't have to make as many stops during your trip.
And if you do stop someplace and
though to the protests.
I felt that my life and other people around me's lives were in danger. And I felt like I had no choice but to do what I did.
With Reinell dead, the U.S. Attorney General says the streets of our cities are safer. But tonight in Portland, the opposite may be true, as police prepare for another night of volatile protests after 2 deaths from demonstrators on opposite sides. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
And there is some positive economic news tonight. 1.4 million jobs added in August, with the unemployment rate dropping to 8.4%. But as Jolene Kent explains, behind the numbers, millions of American families are still struggling.
Just kidding. It's a PB&J on a hot dog bun.
The pandemic has turned Kelly Newman's life upside down. The attorney and mother of 6 with immunocompromised kids was forced to leave her job, fearing exposure to COVID-19. Now, living on her unemployment and her wife's teacher's salary, they canceled internet and depend on public assistance for fruits and vegetables.
After having made such a huge investment in educational debt, I never imagined that I would also be in this financial position.
She's one of 5.2 million people who were unable to look for work.
Grows during our end of the season clearance.
And save up to... Industrial average fell 159 points to close at 28,133. The NASDAQ lost 145 points and the S&P 500 shed 28. Still to come on the NewsHour, Americans continue to feel the financial stresses of COVID as the economy struggles to recover. Hong Kong adjusts to life under a draconian national security law imposed by the Chinese government. We compare the impact of COVID-19 on the American medical system to other systems around the world and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The U.S. economy is continuing to climb back from the worst depths of the pandemic. Today's unemployment report did contain good news about more workers returning to the labor force, but hiring in August slowed compared to the previous few months. The U.S. economy has now recovered about half of the 22 million jobs shed during the plunge. Before we look at the latest, let's hear from a few Americans about the huge struggles they're facing.
My name is Umut Bayramoğlu. I live in Lawrence, Kansas.
My name is Michael Dorsey. I'm in San Diego, California.
My name is Sean Manning. I'm from Martin, Tennessee.
My weekly unemployment benefits is $317 a week. My rent is $290 a week. Doesn't take much math, man. $317 minus $290. that's $27 a week. So that's it.
This is the first time in my life that I've applied for any sort of assistance at all. I started going to the food bank in March, and that was a difficult adjustment to make. It was a food bank that I actually previously had volunteered for.
And that's why he's coming out now, because he knows that it is sticking to him. He is a tool of the radical left who is afraid to stand up to the anti-police wing of his party, and Americans don't like it. That's why he's coming out on the campaign trail, not because any science has changed, but because the political science has changed, and he's in big trouble in the polls, and he knows it.
Tim Martaw is 2020 Director of Communications for the Trump campaign. Tim, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Related to what we were just talking about, the nation's largest police union now backing, quote, America's law and order president. Former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Carrick is here on that as departments brace for a possible crime surge this holiday weekend. Next.
He is a puppet of the socialists, Marxists, and the cop-hating extremists, and they are cop-hating. And we love our law enforcement.
How they gonna pay for
in the arena, and someone who valued the experiment in liberty. And for all of our failings, for all of our shortcomings, for all our sins, we have managed from age to age to stumble forward. We're stumbling backward right now with this president. And I agree with Chief Nance, if I may. We have a remarkable opportunity in about 60 days to fight back with the greatest form of nonviolent protest ever devised by humankind, which is the vote.
You know, well said. I want to play for you Major General Paul Eaton. He's retired, a retired Major General Paul Eaton. He had as visceral a reaction to this as you just heard from Chief Malcolm Nance or from Joe Biden, whose son served as well. Here is Major General Eaton.
You're no patriot. Let me tell you about a patriot. My father was killed in Vietnam. He was shot down over a Ho Chi Minh Trail section just outside of Vietnam and Laos. He delivered ordnance to cut the trail and cut supplies. And then he delivered close air support to Special Forces troops on the ground. And his airplane blew up. He went down in 1969, 13 January 1969. This dog tag was recovered at the crash site. My father was a patriot, well educated. He was a wise man. The best men and women in the United States of America are found in the armed forces of the United States.
Ashley Parker, Vote Vets, is out with a searing new ad with a lot more of that. A lot more people whose families served or who served themselves going after Donald Trump's complete disrespect for the military. Military Times poll shows that Joe Biden's already winning the majority of the votes of military men. And I wonder if those 37% who still support Donald Trump understand that if he breaks overseas voting or mail-in voting, that also means the military vote would be disrupted. They, at Donald Trump's behest, the Pentagon had ordered Stars and Stripes, which had been around since the Civil War, to be shut down, only for Trump to sort of scramble and say he was reversing it. Give us a state of the level of panic inside the White House right now as all of these chickens are coming home to roost.
Well, this is an incredibly undisciplined White House generally, and it underscores their panic and their sense that this really could be a very serious problem for the president, that they actually managed to mobilize a fairly traditional rapid response operation to push back on this. Never, or very rarely, is this White House so laser-like focused on a single message of the day. You had, right after this broke, the president speaking to reporters as he got off Air Force One. Yesterday, you had Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, coming out and doing a briefing. You had the president, again, addressing it in a briefing with reporters just before your show began. Melania Trump even tweeted out something about this. The challenge, of course, is that the president and his team have just about no credibility left. And so they can mount a defense, they can say whatever they want, but the public has fairly good reason not to believe them. And even in the president's defense, there are mistruths and lies embedded in it, in the sense the president said, "I never called John McCain a loser." Well, you just played that clip of him calling John McCain a loser. He was saying it in the context of having lost to Obama in 2008, in the same time when he denigrated him for becoming a prisoner of war. But they can mobilize this response. They are worried. They understand how problematic it could be, but it's unclear who will believe them at this point.
Or who will defend them. Donald Trump had at least 4 generals, or at least 4 high-ranking military men who served in his administration. I haven't seen any of them coming out and defending him.
Tonight, the endorsement of the National Fraternal Order of Police, following news that more than 175 current and former law enforcement leaders are throwing their support behind former Vice President Biden. National correspondent Alex Hogan has the story from New York tonight. Alex.
John, the National Fraternal Order of Police is made up of more than 355,000 members, with the National FOP president today saying in part, during his first 4 years, President Trump has made it crystal clear that he has our backs. Our members know that he listens to the concerns of our brothers and sisters in uniform. The FOP backed Trump in 2016 as well. The president also responding to an endorsement by the Delaware Fraternal Order of Police today, calling the news an honor and slamming his opponent, Delaware President Joe Biden.
It just shows you how pathetic the Democrats are when it comes to crime, when it comes to law and orders.
Currently, about 800,000 officers serve throughout the country. Today's endorsement, the latest in a list of unions supporting the president, making up more than 827,000 active and retired members. But it's not blanketed support across the board for the Trump ticket. More than 190 current and former officials spoke out today endorsing Joe Biden for president. A group which is made up of former U.S. attorneys, state attorneys general, sheriffs, and police chiefs, some labeling Trump as a lawless president. Among them, retired Illinois Police Colonel Joanne Johnson saying in part, "The murder rate is up, and more cops have died of COVID-19 this year on patrol. Yet despite all of that, Donald Trump has continued to insist that he is the law and order president without condemning violence, providing a plan to control COVID-19, or a path for economic recovery." As protests have continued over the summer, police reform is likely to be a key topic for voters this election. John?
Alex Hogan in New York City. Alex, thank you.
There is a particular clause which in very rare circumstances will enable a case which occurs here to be transferred to the mainland for trial.
Grenville Cross was Hong Kong's longest-serving chief prosecutor and is now an honorary professor at two of the city's top universities.
Now, as I understand it, that will only happen extremely rarely and in very clearly defined circumstances. Circumstances where Hong Kong itself is not able to handle the case.
The law marks Beijing's full takeover of Hong Kong, which was promised 50 years of relative autonomy after the British handover in 1997. In response, the Trump administration removed the special trade and economic privileges granted to Hong Kong, saying it's now just like any other part of China.
We have our independent legal systems. We have our independent currency. We are using common law as
can involve two.
Yeah, look, it's hard to know, what impact they can have or how they're spreading things. I think some of our tech companies are doing a good job in trying to police, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, others are trying to police things in a way that they didn't before.
19, it's
Bank West.
After a hard.
At the end when they couldn't come out. So it was more like, we want to go out, we want to play. I don't understand why we're being locked down inside the house.
Podiatrist Rehana and Sadia Alam decided it was time to move their family out of New York City to the Long Island suburbs, eventually finding this house, adding a half hour to the commute, but lots more space.
Is it fair to say that you guys weren't the only ones with this idea? Yes, for sure. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
It was definitely not the buyer's market. Everybody was fighting for the houses here.
The suburbs near New York are booming. In July, home sales were up 44% compared to last year, while the number of properties sold in Manhattan dropped by more than half. People are leaving San Francisco too. There are more than double the properties on the market in the city now compared to last year.
So there's no question people are definitely either moving to other areas outside the city or they're at least buying second homes.
more than enough to prove their vaccine works and works well.
The high level of cell immunity suggests there are great prospects for developing memory cells. This tells us that it will not just create high protective levels at the moment of immunization, but also that this protective impact will last for a very long time.
Russia has been one of the world's worst affected countries in the COVID-19 pandemic, recording more than 1 million cases nationwide. It also has a track record of creating vaccines, famously against polio in the 1950s, more recently in 2016 to battle the outbreak of Ebola in West Africa. But there's been a cautious reception to Russia's COVID-19 vaccine, lack of published data until now, and approval for use before human trials were complete raised concerns about its safety and effectiveness. Even now, with phase 1 and 2 trials published, The Lancet warns the studies are too small and that larger phase 3 trials are needed to know how useful the vaccine will really be. So Erica, does the world have a new COVID-19 vaccine? Well, the Russians would like to think the answer to that is yes, but the scientific consensus outside of Russia appears to be of the view that, while this Russian vaccine is encouraging, it's far too premature to call it a success. Back to you.
We'll keep watching. Matthew Chance, thank you. Convenient location.
It's powerful 5G experience for America.
It's 5G Ultra. Where he sees it heading and why the non-traditional...
Joy, the words we say are window to our souls, how we see the world. So when Donald Trump calls anyone who places their life in the service of others, in the service of the nation, he calls them losers. We understand Trump's soul. By his accounting, self-sacrifice does not make sense. Love of country does not make sense. According to Trump, the winners in life are those that put themselves before all, and the losers are those that don't. What kind of soul this man had? His life is a testament to selfishness. He calls our triumphant war dead losers and celebrates autocrats and dictators and his benefactors, his business benefactors in Russia, like Putin. Words count because they tell us who we are. Donald Trump told us who he is by disrespecting our heroes. He is incapable of understanding service, valor, and courage. His soul cannot conceive of integrity and honor, service to country, selfless service. His soul is that of a coward. And I repeat, his soul is that of a coward, the way he has disrespected our heroes. And I pay tribute to our men and women, those who are serving today and their families, those who have served before, our veterans. I pay tribute to them. This is not who we are. We honor our men and women serving. We honor their families. We honor our veterans and their families. So Donald Trump's soul, by his own words and by his own deeds, he has proven his soul is that of a coward, undeserving of this office of presidency or commander-in-chief.
You know, in this Atlantic piece, one of the people who's quoted, this is a friend of General Kelly, who's a retired four-star general, said that Donald Trump's attitude essentially is that his disrespect is because there's no money in serving in the military, that he can't imagine anyone else's pain, and that he can't imagine, as you said, anyone doing anything that's not for monetary gain. The way that money has featured in this ongoing story of Donald Trump as commander-in-chief is that Russia allegedly put money, bounties on our troops. As as a Gold Star dad, as somebody who can understand the feelings of people whose children are out there, serving around the world, would you be concerned that Donald Trump would not care to protect our troops, given the way he feels?
Well, he has created a moment for our armed forces, for our men and women serving in harm's way, a moment of concern. And as a parent, I can understand the anguish that parents of our loved ones, spouses, husbands, fathers, brothers, sisters of our loved ones feel at this time, since the announcement by our intelligence of the Russia placing bounties on to harm our men and women. I feel the anguish, but Donald Trump he has uttered not a single word to condemn or to deter our adversaries from placing bounties. And that is yet one more proof that he does not value our armed forces. He does not value their sacrifice. He does not value their selfless and voluntarily joining to defend our country, our nation.
Yeah.
And therefore, he has declared himself incapable of and unsuitable for the office that he holds today. And hopefully, come November 3rd, we will be able to get rid of him. We will elect a military father who knows what it takes to send family harm's way, what it takes to wait for their call, what it takes to be in that anguish of their return, and because our men and women, their service, their valor deserves better commander-in-chief. He is incapable of understanding service, valor, and courage. His soul, we have observed him these 3-4 years, his soul cannot conceive of integrity and honor. And he is devoid of a basic character of a leader like United States of America. a character of a commander-in-chief of the armed forces of United States, and that character is empathy, compassion. He is totally void of that, and we had said that in 2016, knowing his background a little bit, but he has proven us right, and but hopefully America has found it out, and America is not going to buy his whatever he is selling one more time.
Or that, or did we not do not as well as Germany but better than the UK? But it's, what's the status of the virus over the next 60 days? Is it waxing? Is it waning? Are there better treatments? Is there vaccination in the short term? And is it going to end? And the same thing with the lockdown. It's no longer Nancy Pelosi's hairdresser and this. It's, are 50 million kids going to go back to school quicker or later? And the same thing with the economy. It's not a question that's crashed. It's coming back. It's just a question of how fast. And so these are going to be September and October issues. The polls, the bettors in Vegas have us about even. And we're not going to have a virtual campaign anymore. And I think it's going to be very unpredictable, very wild, but very exciting too.
Well, in talking about campaign issues, the Fox News polling unit asked the voters of Florida what are the issues that are important to them. And the results are pretty interesting. 27%, a plurality, say the economy. That's pretty traditional in an election year, or in any election, presidential election. But look at the other big item, law and order. 19% of Americans, or 19% of Floridians, say law and order is going to be the most important issue in deciding their vote for president. Now, does that inure to the benefit of the man who I'm sorry, this is a Quinnipiac University poll. I was trying to take credit for it as Fox News. It's Quinnipiac. But does that inure to the benefit of the president?
Yeah, it does, because it benefits the candidate who's been railing the longest that you had to stop this violence. You can't burn police alive in their precinct in Portland. You can't have looting in the $1 Million Mine. Who's been doing that the longest? And the voters will make their decision on that basis. And they're not isolated extraneous issues. Are connected, because people know if you can't go downtown, or your shopping center's inoperative, or you're afraid to go out in your car, then you're not going to get back economically. And so that shows you they want to go back to normal and take some measurable risk with the COVID, but they can't do it if there's not order in the streets. So the two issues reflect and they enhance each other, and I think in both cases it favors Trump. And I'll be the first to say that the Zoom virtual candidacy of Biden 90 days in his basement, given some cognitive issues he's had, was ideal for him. And that's, I think that was reflected in his poll leads, which I think was genuine, but I don't think that's true any longer. I think it backfired. I think maybe after 30 or 40 days he should have gotten out and preemptively weighed in on these riots and looting and arson before it's too late. But as I said, he's kind of a prisoner of his own paradox. He's made a devil bargain with the hard left, and it's very hard for him to unequivocally condemn them, and that's coming home to roost, I'm afraid, for him.
Expressed through Kenosha, not working.
Jonathan, how did you see this?
Well, Judy, I look at it as at the two trips like this. One was a political, both were political trips, but one was political, the other was presidential. President Trump's trip was strictly political. To David's point, it was all about law and order. It was all about stoking fear, white grievance, white fear of black people, standing with law enforcement, which on its face is not wrong or problematic, but in a city where a 17-year-old allegedly shot at 3 people, killed 2 of them, and those same police officers rolled right by him. The president has had nothing but good things to say about that person who was part of a militia, a right-wing militia. And so the president goes to Kenosha to, buttress that. Joe Biden, on the other hand, I think did a presidential trip. He went to the Kenosha community to meet with the community, met with the Blake family, apparently talked with Jacob Blake, but the community meeting he did at a local church where he heard from all sorts of folks from the community was him sitting, listening, responding in kind. And a young woman, Portia Bennett, who decided not to read the list of demands from her organization, but instead decided to talk from the heart and talk to Vice President Biden about how, quote, heavily angry she and her community are about not being treated fairly. And the way Joe Biden responded to that, I think, was sort of a balm over the entire situation. Because in situations that happened have happened in Kenosha, people look to the president for calm, for leadership. They got that from Joe Biden, but Joe Biden isn't the president.
Well, both candidates during this past week have released TV ads that address racial unrest, address
all the events that we're having.
Marshall, the director of tribal housing for the Flanders Santee Sioux, is working as fast and as hard as she can to get any tribal members registered in this year's count. She's doing well thanks to some special marketing tactics, like a raffle for a laundry basket full of supplies every other week for those who sign up. In fact, Flandreau has one of the highest counts in Native country across the nation. But she knows there are far more out there to be counted. And there's a lot at stake. Funding for roads, healthcare, education, housing, even something like state and federal aid for COVID-19 relief. What is allocated for any of it in the coming years depends on what gets turned in over the next few weeks.
It's very scary to know that we are so undercounted. And living here, how many Native people live here, not just from our tribe, but from all tribes. And they're not understanding the importance of the census and what those numbers can affect.
In the last census, American Indians and Alaska Natives had the highest undercount rate of any ethnic group. That's according to the National Indian Council on Aging. Among the reasons, unemployment, education, poverty, and more than 80% of reservation lands ranked among the country's hardest to count areas. Here in South Dakota, Secretary of Tribal Affairs David Flute offers another insight.
But because there is a shortage of housing, a huge shortage, we don't want to see homelessness. So some tribes are a little flexible with allowing families to live with families, and for some of those families that do not want to get in trouble with their tribal housing, some of those members do not fill out the census form because they think it's going to be held against them by their tribe. So there are some challenges like that.
But the resources are there, Flute says, to get it done. It's just up to each of us to sign up. Carlene Wild, Dakota News Now.
Flute says tribes are all provided with a lot of information to send out and share, but it is on tribal members themselves to fill out the forms, just like it is for everyone else. By the way, the process is easy. You go to census.gov, filling out the forms only takes a few minutes to do. And again, this deadline, unless something changes, is coming up on September 30th.
A national fast food chain is overhauling its menu. We'll tell you if your favorite item is on the chopping block in about 15 minutes. Hi, Tyler.
Hey there, Kelsey. Hot temperatures returning for tomorrow and Sunday, but we are going to be ending this Labor Day weekend on a very chilly note. We'll talk about that coming up in your First Alert forecast.
Thank you, Tyler. The president is pushing back against a magazine article that has taken center stage on both sides of the aisle. The latest from Washington, next.
Eric, Vanessa, and Aaron, weekday mornings on Dakota News Now.
The first fields that I planted back to grasses. I was shocked one day. I was just driving across, checking the field, and all of a sudden I just stopped the vehicle, and there was a lek of sharp-tailed grouse in front of me doing a dance. And I stood there and watched it. We have mule deer and whitetails. I mean, they're more than abundant. I think taking care of the grass and the soil beneath the grass, those other things tend to take care of themselves.
It's the final days of the...
is well aware that he needs the support of members of the military in his re-election effort. So he has repeatedly tried to portray himself as allied with the military. He frequently says falsely that the military was depleted when he arrived and that he rebuilt it. It is true that he has focused on some aspects of funding, but he has also been very publicly disparaging of John McCain, who he has a fight over land use and a loan that the president sought as a developer going back to 1996. He has questioned why anybody would serve in Vietnam and suggested that people who did go were too dumb to find a way to get out of it. He himself did not go and claimed that it was because of bone spurs. And so I think that we have seen this with him over a very long period of time. People who have been around him, not just in the last couple of years, but over a lengthy stretch, have heard him say things like this because he can't, and this is really, I think, the thrust of the Atlantic article is he can't imagine anything that is not a transaction. He cannot imagine doing something where what you don't get out of it is either monetary or celebrity or some immediate tangible benefit.
That it could be for someone else or for the greater good or for your country as opposed to for yourself. Vice President Biden is seizing on all of this. I want to play quickly some of what he had to say today.
Duty, honor, country. These are values that drive our service members. President Trump has demonstrated he has no sense of service, no loyalty to any cause other than himself.
Maggie, how concerned tonight do you think the campaign is about the president's standing with both veterans and those who are currently serving?
Erica, they're worried. I mean, this is something that I've been talking to people about throughout the day. They knew that this was something that they had to push back on. This was something, unlike a lot of what has happened in this campaign amid an economic crisis and the coronavirus, not much has punched through that voters who, not a huge segment of them, were undecided. The voters who are undecided might pay attention to. The campaign knows this is something that could, and the president's advisors know they don't have a whole lot of capital with senior military figures to call on to ask them to come and defend him. And they have been worried also that this is the beginning of sort of a slow drip of people speaking out. Remember, there are a couple of major moments yet to come about this administration, and one is going to be the Bob Woodward book that comes out in a week and a half. That could contain more revelations just like this.
Maggie, appreciate it. Thank you. Out front next, growing questions about the case involving the death of a black man after police covered his head and pinned him to the ground. Why did it take so long for details to make their way to top officials? And just who is propping up Kanye West's run for president?
9 a month.
Democratic
race,
whose late son served in Iraq, seizing on the story today.
If these statements are true, the president should humbly apologize to every Gold Star mother and father and every Blue Star family that he's denigrated and insulted. Who the heck does he think he is?
A progressive veterans group out today with a searing ad aimed at the president.
My son is not a loser.
A broadside against a commander-in-chief who casts himself as the military's strongest ally.
The controversy coming on a day when the White House wanted to promote job gains for the month of August, the unemployment rate dropping to 8.4%, and Joe Biden wanted to take the president to task for not doing more to fight the coronavirus crisis. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Outside, we've got a beautiful night across the Dakota News Now viewing area. In the days ahead, well, there's a little bit of everything. Tyler's first alert.
Something uplifting, but we appreciate both of you. Thank you for being here. Jonathan Capehart, David Brooks, thank you. Stay with us. We will reflect on some of the lives lost due to COVID-19. But first, take a moment here. Your local PBS station. It's a chance to offer your support, which helps to keep programs like ours on the air.
We'll return to this edition of the PBS NewsHour in just a moment. But right now, we're asking you to take an important step during these unprecedented times.
It's up. A whole bunch has changed since the dropping of the test.
Undisputed. Kimberly Klacik is a congressional candidate. Hang on a second. Kimberly Klacik, Republican congressional candidate in Maryland. Richard Fowler. Thank you both. Still ahead, Purple Heart recipient Sean Parnell with a deeply personal message about President Trump's relationship with America's heroes.
and Roberto Ferdman, a correspondent for Vice News who's been reporting on the Breonna Taylor case. Roberto, I'm going to go to you first. Let's show these photos. So there are apparently discrepancies in the placement of several of the bullet casings between what was pictured that night and the following day. Please explain what we're seeing here.
So on the crime scene, I mean, when you go through there are more than 40 different markers that mark bullets and bullet casings. In this case, we're looking at bullet casings. And what's really of note is that the bullet casings move from pictures that are taken at night to pictures the following day. The ones taken the following day are the ones with the kind of yellowish green markers, depending on how colorblind you are like me. But the importance of this is that on a crime scene, after a crime, especially like what happens during the raid on Breonna Taylor's apartment, none of this stuff should be touched. We talked to a criminologist, Peter Kraska, who was disappointed but not surprised based on what he has seen in LMPD to see that some things had been moved. And then we spoke to a former narcotics officer, who pointed out these discrepancies in the photos. We shared kind of the broader documents with them.
And you also found that, despite what we heard before, that police should have known that there might be a second person in Breonna Taylor's apartment who was a licensed carrier of a firearm. Is that also accurate?
So Sergeant Mattingly, it's the only testimony that we have from one of the officers who executes the raid on Breonna Taylor's apartment. He says that they believed that she would be alone. The intelligence that they were given suggested that she would be alone in her home. What we have learned is that the team that conducts the broader investigation, the investigation that leads them to that home and then to 4 other homes that night, requested intelligence within LMPD on Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend, the day before. And that in a risk assessment matrix that should have been filled out before the raid, they indicate risk factors that are consistent with things they would have seen in that intelligence. Now, if the team that performs the investigation does not share that with the team that executes the raid, that is a problem. If the team that executes the raid is lying about not knowing, that's also a problem. So there really isn't a case in which something has not gone awry in this raid.
Paul, what does this say to you? Kenneth Walker, Mr. Walker, who was in the home and witnessed the shooting of his girlfriend, he's suing, claiming police misconduct. Does what you just heard sound like misconduct to you?
Absolutely. There's been a cover-up from day one. Joy, remember the cops who killed George Floyd were charged within days. The cops who killed Rayshard Brooks were charged within days. Almost 6 months, still no prosecution in the Breonna Taylor case. In those earlier 2 cases involving those men, that sent a message that their lives mattered to prosecutors. And taking almost 6 months with still no charges, the prosecutors are sending a very different message about the life of Breonna Taylor. And again, there's been consistent irregularities. The police report was a big lie. The cops have the nerve to say that nobody had been hurt when Breonna Taylor was pronounced dead on the scene. They have the nerve to say that they entered the apartment peacefully when in fact they broke down the door with a battering ram.
What does it also say to you that, we know that the person they say they were coming to arrest was not there, was actually already in custody. He has now come forward to admit that prosecutors tried to make him take a plea deal. They wanted him to falsely incriminate Breonna Taylor and claim she was part of a drug ring. What does that tell you, Paul?
It sounds like a cover-up. They're trying to find some kind of way to make these officers not accountable. Everybody should focus on the facts. These officers fired rounds and rounds of bullets. They shot up 8 different rooms in 2 different apartments. They knew they were putting innocent people in danger. Joy, one of the officers fired 10 rounds literally through a closed and covered door. He was shooting through a patio door. He couldn't see who or what he was shooting. That cop was fired. His own boss, the chief of police, said he displayed extreme indifference to human life. Well, guess what? That's the standard for a criminal case. All of these officers should have been brought to justice months ago.
Roberto, what do you walk away with in terms of what you found in this case? And do you think that the body camera, is there any chance that it was on and we're just not being told that that there is footage?
What we've been told in the aftermath of publishing our report is that Tony James, he's one of 7 officers who executes the raid, and he's also the officer who's pictured wearing a body camera in the aftermath of it when LMPD takes a picture. We were told that he did not have his camera activated. We have not confirmed that, but we've heard it from multiple sources, and local station WDRB reported that as well. Now, one of the main takeaways from this case, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is that very little information is out in the public right now. I know that it's been a very long time since this raid happened, but the Louisville Metro Police Department, the Louisville Metro government, the Attorney General's office in Kentucky, they have not released very much information at all. They continue to cite an ongoing investigation and not releasing records to journalists like myself. And the public doesn't know basic things. I mean, they haven't even acknowledged all 7 officers, at least 7 officers who were present there. They've continued to say the names of Miles Cosgrove, Brett Hankeson, and Jonathan Mattingly. And I think that until more information is shared with the public, everyone should continue to be skeptical of the little bits of information that trickle out.
Yeah, no kidding. And what's the next move for Vice? I mean, do we anticipate you guys, going to court to get more information? Because I think everyone wants it.
I don't know if we have reached that decision just yet. I might get a phone call after this if I say anything to that effect. But we plan to fight to get records, and we also plan to go back to Louisville soon. We've spent about a month of the past 3 months there, so we don't plan to let up, and hopefully no one else does either.
Thank you very much for doing that, Paul Butler. I know a lot of people care a lot about this case, so thank you for following up on it. And Paul Butler, who I know if you look online will find, has given his opening statement and what he would say would be the prosecution of those officers. You should check that out. Thank you all. Thank you both for being here. We'll be right back.
Sparkly smile she always wanted. Thoroughbred.
His sister said Charlie was quiet growing up, but was outgoing with his patients. Alex Bernard was known as Pastor Alex, an outreach pastor in Downey, California, who preached, fed, and helped others, including Mexican inmates. A program that saved Alex from drug abuse at a young age introduced him to the ministry he served for 30 years. With his wife, he helped others rebuild their lives. The 57-year-old was silly and compassionate, his daughter said. He was a father to 8, including 4 adopted children. Dwantrez Lovett was a big guy with a bigger heart, his mother said. Following in her footsteps, Dwantrez became a barber. He was known for the sound advice and mentoring he gave to anyone in his chair. With his 5-year-old daughter, he strived to be the father he never had. They loved spending time with their dogs and going to the local park in Hazelwood, Missouri. In February, he wed the love of his life in a ceremony surrounded by family. Dwantrez was 29 years old. Jeff Kurtzman was full of aloha, or love, his friends said, known for his warm heart and giving nature. The Los Angeles native moved to Honolulu when he turned 18. For more than 3 decades, Jeff worked as a flight attendant for Hawaiian Airlines. Spiritual, an adventurer, and lover of the outdoors, Jeff was also an avid photographer. Wherever he went, he had his camera with him. Jeff was 60 years old. And we thank all the family members who contributed to these stories. Our hearts go out to you and all those who've lost loved ones in this pandemic.
$37,000.
Be right back here on KDLT.
Plus no interest, no payments until fall 2021. Offer ends soon.
Call 1-800.
Electric vehicles. The Amazon vans have.
That's right. Save 50% on every month of delicious meal.
That's Fidelity Wealth Management.
Private Caputo. He came here badly frightened, smelling of mold, Smelling, as you said, like a wet burlap sack. Like a wet burlap sack. An odor can be the most powerful memory trigger.
Well, Sunday at 1 Eastern on ESPN2, the Brewers take up.
Good experience for this young man, to be able to get called up into the big leagues and to have a debut like he did today, should be pretty proud of himself.
And yet another in the long list of players this year for the Twins that have had opportunities due to injuries in the Twins starting lineup, and Rooker makes it worthwhile for himself here today, picking up big league hit and big league RBI number 1. The Twins sweep the doubleheader by winning 3-2 in the second game. Up next, another great effort by the Minnesota bullpen to break it down on the Twins Live.
My name is Joe. I'm a sustainability science researcher at...
Thank you.
Black candidates say GOP efforts to prop up West are particularly shameless in light of West's diagnosis with bipolar disorder, which is marked by swings between mania and depression. West has said he does not take medication for it.
It's really sad, and we wish Kanye the best in terms of getting his mental health under control. But again, this is not what we want to see in politics.
I'm not running for president. I'm walking.
Still, Republicans are turning up to help West. One source tells CNN that GOP operatives believed they had the Trump campaign's blessing to aid West's efforts. GOP lawyer Leigh Ruland, who's also doing legal work for the Trump campaign, dropped off signatures for West's attempt to get on the ballot in Wisconsin. Mark Jacoby, an executive at Let the Voters Decide, is helping West collect signatures in multiple states. He previously pleaded guilty to voter registration fraud for his work for the California Republican Party. A representative for the company said any focus on Jacoby's record has nothing to do with any political campaign and is misplaced.
A million years. This president has done more for our veterans in this country than I think any other president in my lifetime. This is a guy that brought historic choice in healthcare to the VA reform that hadn't been seen in a generation. He rebuilt our military so that our warfighters could go to war with the most cutting-edge tech. I mean, he's bringing our men and women home because he believes that the men and women who raised their right hand to serve this country are our nation's most precious natural resource. In fact, he called me out randomly to run for Congress based solely on my military service. I wasn't even at the event. I had never met or talked to him. In fact, I got a call from my mom in South Carolina. I was doing a charity event, and she says, "Sean, are you running for Congress?" And I said, "Mom, no, I'm not running for Congress." And she pauses and she goes, "Well, the President of the United States says you're running for Congress." And she sent me a video, and it was the president praising my military service. And so I got in the race, turned my life upside down. And then, a couple months later, I'm riding around with the vice president, and the president calls me personally. And the first thing that he says, John, is, "We love and appreciate your service and the sacrifice of your men on the battlefield." And he said, "You're going to win this race because you know what it means to fight. You fought for your troops in the battlefield, and you're going to fight for the people here at home in this country because that's what this job is all about." And so the president of the United States loves and appreciates our military.
You were at the event with the president in Latrobe last night. Did you get a chance to speak to him?
I didn't get a chance to speak to him, but it was the first time I actually saw him face to face. And I got to tell you, there were probably 10,000 people at that rally, and it was one of the most positive, energetic events that I've ever experienced. It was the first Trump rally that I've ever been to. But the level of patriotism that was on display and the love of country that was on display was just emblematic of this president's entire movement. 10,000 people in a small town in western Pennsylvania. The momentum is on this president's side in keeping this country on the straight and narrow in the path to greatness.
Sean Parnell is a Purple Heart recipient. He has quite a story from the fields of Afghanistan. Sean, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the story for Friday, September 4th, 2020. But as always, the story continues. Martha is back on Monday to host a special Labor Day program. Have a great weekend.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Tucker Carlson Tonight. You probably didn't see it live, not many people did. But last month, a former Republican member of Congress called Susan Molinari spoke at the Democratic National Convention. If you thought about it, it was an odd moment. Susan Molinari is a very nice person, actually. People who know her like her. But it wasn't really clear what she was doing speaking at the Democratic convention. Most Democratic voters probably never have heard of Susan Molinari, and her whole speech lasted just a
like his supporters to break the law and vote twice, and reportedly thinks members of the United States military are losers. Versus Biden, a man who rejects everything Trump stands for, especially his treatment of the military.
It's a fake story. I've done more for the military than almost anybody else.
It's sick. It is deplorable. It is so un-American. It is so unpatriotic.
People that are in the dark shadows, they're people that are controlling the streets. We had somebody get on a plane from a certain city this weekend, and in the plane it was almost completely loaded with thugs.
What in God's name are we doing? It's mortifying. It's embarrassing, and it's dangerous.
What you have to do is send in your early ballot and then go and make sure that ballot is tabulated or counted. And if it's not counted, vote.
He's a fraud.
The election comes down to who makes a better case for healing the country with more.
I mentioned earlier, and as I said, General Kelly's son Robert is buried there. Reading again from Goldberg's account, quote, Trump, while standing by Robert Kelly's grave, turned directly to his father and said, I don't get it. What was in it for them? Goldberg also reported, citing 3 sources, that when Senator John McCain died, he said, quote, we're not going to support that loser's funeral. The president last night tweeted that he never called the late senator a loser. Really? Keeping them honest, watch the tape.
I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, you know, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that, because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to him. He hit me. He's not a war hero. He's a war hero. 5.5 years. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
He was 5 years in a Vietnamese prison, and he let others be released before him, though he was offered the chance. That's John McCain. Those were the president's words, though. Not a war hero, a loser. Again, he denied it last night. Today he did not.
I say what I say, and I never got along with John McCain. I disagreed with John McCain. You know that better than anybody, frankly. I wasn't a fan.
As for John Kelly, well, even as he denied allegations that he showed contempt for the troops, the president took an opportunity to show, quite publicly, and for the cameras, deliberate contempt for Kelly.
He didn't do a good job, had no temperament, and ultimately he was petered out. He was exhausted. This man was totally exhausted. He wasn't even able to function in the last number of months. He was not able to function. He was sort of a tough guy. By the time he got eaten up in this world, it's a different world than he was used to, he was unable to function.
As for the Atlantic story itself, the president called it a hoax. He called the Atlantic a second-rate magazine, then a third-rate magazine, and he took verbal swipes at Joe Biden, himself the father of a son who served, or as the president apparently would put it, father of a sucker.
If it's true, and based on other things he said, I believe the article is true, I'd ask you all a rhetorical question. How do you feel? How would you feel if you had a kid in Afghanistan right now? How would you feel if you lost a son, daughter, husband, wife? How would you feel, for real? I've just never been as disappointed in my whole career with a leader that I've worked with, president or otherwise, that if the article is true, and it appears to be based on the things he said, it is absolutely damnable. It is a disgrace.
CNN's Caitlin Collins is at the White House now with more. And Caitlin, you've seen it, I've seen it. This White House has denied a whole host of stories that have later proven to be true. Tell us how the White House is handling this controversy and how the president himself is handling it.
Well, what we saw yesterday is just how angry the president was over this, that you've never really seen the White House mobilize that quickly to deny a story in the fashion that we have seen play out over the last 24 hours, where they have gotten current and former officials to come forward and dispute the story, even culminating with the First Lady weighing in just a few moments ago, saying she believed this story was activism, not journalism, in a tweet that she posted to her account. And so you can see really the effort that they're putting behind this to deny it. But of course, what's notable when you look at that, Jim, is that the people who could deny it, who are pretty credible when it comes to the president and the military, have not said anything. And John Kelly is one of those, the former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, Joe Dunford. There are several notable figures who have been silent over the last 24 hours, and I think that could really do a lot to change the trajectory of this story.
You covered this White House while John Kelly was serving as Chief of Staff. See the kind of person who at this point might take this moment to challenge the president here?
That's a big question that a lot of people are wondering. I don't think the president really did himself a service in the briefing earlier to keep John Kelly from coming forward and confirming the details of the story if he could. Of course, he hasn't weighed in either way, so we're not sure really what he would say. But it was interesting, you saw the president going after him. And the president and John Kelly certainly had their bad moments when he was Chief of Staff. We reported at one point, right before John Kelly was removed as Chief of Staff, that they were not even on speaking terms. But the way the president spoke about him earlier, basically saying he was incompetent and couldn't live up to the pressure of the West Wing, is notable when you just consider what John Kelly has done. He is a retired four-star Marine general. He led Southcom. He has a son who, as you noted, died in Afghanistan. He's been through a lot, is my point. And so the way the president spoke about him, it is kind of hard to see how that would not garner a response from John Kelly.
We'll be watching. Caitlin Collins, thanks very much.
Lower education in Alabama, and that's exactly what he did.
And you should not be able to see those data. From The Lancet, Twitter went a step further and had their 27-year-old liberal arts majors lock down the president's campaign account until the campaign deleted video themselves. In other words, kiss the ring, said Twitter. We won't just erase the video, we need you to bow publicly to our authority and do it yourself. This has implications far beyond the election, far beyond who becomes president in January. This is about how much power the tech monopolies will have. It's about how much power the professional class can continue to wield as the middle class dies. Technology executives in San Francisco are the product of those institutions, of left-wing universities. They've been trained to dislike the country that made their success possible, and they very much do. So anything they do that can weaken social cohesion in this country or trust in our institutions is, of course, appealing. And that includes pushing mail-in voting, which everyone knows abets voter fraud. That's why big tech is pushing that. It's why they're backing radical politicians and DAs like Chessie Boudin in San Francisco. People like that degrade and destabilize our country. But Silicon Valley is in favor of that and has been in favor of that since 2016. And they've been getting away with it. Sagar Enjeti is an opinion host at The Hill.
Who Donald Trump is, and once again, he's told us over and over again who he is. A lot of people have chosen to ignore it, but it's coming back again at a crucial time.
People, Jason, normally wake up from the Donald Trump cult of personality when it hits them personally. Michael Cohen is one of those guys who was the attack dog for Donald Trump for a long time. He was willing to get real nasty with Donald Trump's opponents. But then he found out, that Donald Trump has no loyalty, and he ended up going to jail after doing his bidding. Here is the Michael Cohen. This is a recent interview that he actually gave to our own Lester Holt. And this is a pretty scary thing he said, but I want to let you react to it.
Do you think he'll win another term as president?
But Donald Trump will do anything and everything within which to win. And I believe that includes manipulating the ballots. I believe that he would even go so far as to start a war in order to prevent himself from being removed from office. My biggest fear is that there will not be a peaceful transition of power in 2020.
Jason, listen, it took a lot of bravery for people like John Lewis to take blows to the head in order to vote. It feels like it's going to take a lot of personal courage and people having to stand in lines with COVID out there, people having to overcome that fear. It's going to take a lot of determination. And I worry that sometimes the things that people say Donald Trump could do will make people scared. But what do you think is the balance right now of sort of voter courage versus voter fear?
So right before this segment, I was actually texting with friends of mine in North Carolina. I said, did you guys start today? It's early voting. They're like, we didn't know, because there are polling places around the corner from their house. We have to remember that a lot of the fear mongering that Trump engages in, it's not what people are experiencing day in and day out. A lot of people, their polling place is close to them. It's someplace they can go to. So between that and the people asking for mail-in ballots, I think most people don't necessarily live in that fear. What I am most concerned about is not how people vote, it's the count afterwards. It's sending out Proud Boys and neo-Nazis and terrorists and all these white nationalists to polling stations to threaten the vote counters, to threaten the people who are supposed to be collecting the information. It's the manipulation from Russia or the White House after the fact. That is where I think that we should be really concerned. And again, I got to point back a little bit with Charlie. There are no persuadables at this point. There's no one who just woke up to this. Everybody knows Donald Trump is a bad guy. This election is purely about turnout. Can the Democrats get their people to vote and then get those votes fairly counted? Because there's not one person in America that heard that Donald Trump doesn't like the vets today. There's no one who heard that, he didn't remember LaDavid's name, man, woman, child, camera. The guy doesn't remember anything. He's never liked the military. It's just a matter of getting out the vote, because persuasion ended 4 years ago.
Well, the other thing that people know, Charlie, is they know what's in their pocketbook. There are a lot of people who it's not clear they're going to be able to vote because they've been evicted. And so it's not clear that they have an address with which to vote. There's a lot of people who just can't pay their bills right now, and that's their focus. Let's look at these jobs numbers. I mean, it is a catastrophe. We are at near 1930s levels of catastrophe, economic catastrophe. And it is shocking, I think, to a lot of people. I mean, you've dealt with these people on the radio that can take this kind of pain, this kind of agony and misery and humiliation. Donald Trump obviously doesn't even care about them, whether they live or die. He's like, come to my rally and get COVID. He doesn't care. I do wonder about whether people who are that sucked in and who are that sort of cultified, I wonder, like Jason, if there's any point in looking for persuadables. If you believe in this guy at this point, there's nothing that can take you away from him.
No, that's right. I mean, the cult is not persuadable. I completely agree with that. But I do think that there is a group of voters that is at least on the bubble. And as we get closer to this election, they are going to have to say, can we take 4 more years of this? Is America headed in the right direction? And I think it's
to you. You decide. Take a look.
The largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
What kind of a chance would a northeastern liberal like Joe Biden stand in the South?
Better than anybody else. You don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. You got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
Oh, we can keep going. First, mainstream African American, first one who's articulate, bright, and clean. This is a storybook. What? Believe it or not, his rhetoric has actually gotten much worse. A few weeks ago, Biden told radio host Charlemagne, the God, the following. You decide.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Pretty obvious why Biden spends most of his days hiding in his basements. Democrats are now being caught on tape. They don't want anyone to actually see the real Joe Biden, the lying, the weird statements, the racial rhetoric, the constant confusion. Question America's going to have to ask and answer in 146 days. Is Joe Biden fit to serve as the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States? Now he's even deploying one of the old Democratic Party favorite tactics. He's now playing the race card. I pointed out, I've done this history so many times. Every 2 years, every 4 years, like clockwork, Republicans, they are racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They want dirty air and water. They want grandma and grandpa to eat dog food, cat food before Paul Ryan or a Republican or Trump lookalike throws granny over a cliff in a wheel.
Such value on finding soldiers missing in action because they had performed poorly and gotten caught and deserved what they got. I have to ask your reaction to that, given your connection with your father and his service and how he was lost in combat?
Rachel, we have an ethos in the U.S. military, and one of the reasons that the American soldier, Marine, Airman, Sailor, Coast Guardsman will do amazing things is because they trust the chain of command to bring them back. That the chain of command will give the bullets and the food and the leadership they need in order to prosecute the mission. So this dog tag was found by a member of the Joint Task Force Full Accounting Team, the team that goes to former war zones and brings back the remains of our fallen. You can see that it's mangled. What happens to a dog tag in an explosion when the aircraft goes down? Our country, this great country, goes to great lengths to bring back our fallen. And again, the reason that the American soldier does so well is he trusts the chain of command to do just that. Unfortunately, after what we've heard about this particular president, that's a hard sell to every drill sergeant trying to soldierize, trying to build a soldier out of every young man and woman who comes through our doors.
Retired Major General Paul Eaton, sir, it is a real honor to have you with us tonight. I know that, again, you have the choice whether or not to speak publicly on matters like this, and this was a big one. Thank you for helping us understand, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you for what you do, Rachel.
Kind of you to say. All right. We've got a lot more coming up here this Friday night. In fact, I'm just going to stay on for 2 hours tonight. I have a lot to say. We'll be right back.
Than anybody, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln, nobody has even been close.
And coming up, my opening monologue on Joe Biden's never-ending campaign of blunders. You don't want to miss this one. Next.
Unlike any other. On the trail, inside the 2020 primaries, tomorrow at 8 on CNN.
I don't imagine at this moment, but I've now been at President Trump's side for almost 30 years. All these years later, there's a part of me that still feels a sense of wonder every day when I consider the journey we have taken together and taken with so many of you watching tonight. Because my personal story with Donald Trump, in so many ways, is yours too. He saw potential in me, a spark, the possibility that I could be more, do more, and achieve more than even I thought was possible. That's how he views this country too. We have all just scratched the surface of what we can do together. If there's one thing I hope you will hear from me tonight, it is this. President Trump is a kind and decent man. I wish you could be at his side with me to see his endless kindness to everyone he meets. The media could be a fog machine, creating a partisan mist around everything that's hard to see through. But in 2016, you navigated through it all. You found your way through the swamp, and you arrived safely on the other side, with Donald J. Trump as your new president. There are some things that were true then, reasons why you choose him as your country's leader, that remain true today. You know the president cannot be bought. The American people must know their president isn't building his life. He's building yours. He knows the president cannot be bullied. President Trump is the first leader who's been too strong, too tough, and too savvy to be crushed by the status quo establishment and the political media class. You know the president cannot be beaten. He's got a fighting spirit, like so many of you do. And winning for America is what he does. While they call it chaos, President Trump calls it change. Just think about what we achieved together with President Trump.
This is our mission, and we'll do it together.
Pulmonologist and global health policy expert at the University of Washington Medical Center. Doctor, thank you again for being...
And so many more. He did that once, and he will do it again. You know it, and I know it. We all just need somebody to believe in our capacity to do great things. Donald Trump believed in me when I was a teenage golf caddy, and he was already one of the wealthiest, most famous people on the entire planet. He saw my potential, even when I couldn't. He sees greatness in our country too, and in each of you. He believes the world you dream about at night can be yours. He truly is a man of the people. Just think about what he has done with this convention. You've heard from real Americans with real stories.
View Trump favorable, but we really wanted them to bring him in alive, preferably because there's several people involved in that murder, and we want to figure out who they are.
Portland police say they're still investigating and are looking for this man who witnessed the shooting. Meanwhile, a memorial will be held Saturday in Vancouver, Washington, hosted by Patriot Prayer to celebrate the life of Aaron J. Danielson. Mike?
Rick Leventhal, thank you. 2 flashpoints in the demonstrations and destruction plaguing America's cities have turned deadly in the last 2 weeks, and now Michael Raynal is dead, and 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse is facing murder charges. Let's talk about law and order in America's summer of discontent with the acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli. Welcome, sir.
Good evening.
The suspect in last weekend's Portland killing is now dead, but he talked to Vice News before being taken down by a federal task force.
When I showed up, I saw more of their vehicles than real citizen vehicles. It felt like the beginning of a war. But I see a civil war right around the corner. That shot felt like the beginning of a war.
In this case, Ken, did the feds have to go get him because the Portland mayor wasn't going to do it?
Well, and the marshals are the best in the world at tracking down fugitives, and they did it here. He had also crossed state lines, so they were outside of Portland. It's not unusual to have federal-state cooperation like you saw in this effort. It's what we've frankly been asking for on the ground with Portland and Governor Brown for a long time. When it happens, peace breaks out, and they are letting this violence linger. And what you're seeing is that violence begets violence. You look at Kenosha, you use immediate responsible force to quell violence, and peace is what breaks out.
The U.S. Marshal Service says the task force attempted to peacefully arrest him. In this case, do authorities lose much because they cannot question him about Antifa and its activities?
Well, look, our goal in any situation like this is to abduct, detain, really, the individual peacefully. That's the goal. You have a criminal, alleged criminal here, obviously strong suspect, and the goal is to detain him peacefully. But the first object in going after a situation like this where you know somebody is dangerous is to protect your officers. And they did what they had to do under the circumstances, frankly. I don't see any fault in that. And but to your question, of course we'd have rather he was detained peacefully, that no shots were fired, that no violence had taken place. That's always our preference. And it isn't just so that we can have those conversations with the individual, though that's important. It's because we don't want anybody hurt, even criminals. And they make that decision.
We have live images of Rochester, New York, where there's been a disruption tonight. A lot of people outdoor dining tonight, and there's been a disruption in terms of protesters turning to the streets. Is it your assessment that the worst is behind us in places like Portland, Kenosha, and some of the other hotspots?
I would say yes, but a lot of what we've seen the last 3 months has been very unpredictable. And a lot of it has been, sadly, it's overshadowed the original area of concern, the death of George Floyd. That hasn't been a focus of anyone in Portland. It's been an excuse occasionally, but you haven't heard any public dialogue. You haven't heard any discussion in Portland or Kenosha or Rochester about things that might be done differently. And that's the kind of discussion, the First Amendment expression that we're out there to try to protect. Yet we see violence, we see rioters, and that has to come to an end. And I do think the worst is behind us.
Ken Cuccinelli, thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful weekend.
Good to be with you.
Can the government make you take the vaccine? Night Court convenes next.
Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance.
The post-war leadership of the Philippines essentially outsourced the Philippines' external security concerns to the United States. And in fact, time and again, during one natural crisis after the other, including during the Yolanda or Haiyan superstorm in 2013, we saw America deploying thousands of its
membership in the club of die-hard Americans. Now, we don't know what Mr. Herron or Dr. King would think of this ongoing revolution today. More of it playing out on our screens, televised and viral, and sometimes unavoidable even to those who've been trying to avoid and deny these American realities forever. But we do know right now the revolutionaries are out there, not only marching and organizing, but also taping even in the moments of deepest tragedy and violence, exercising their die-hard American rights. It's worth listening to them and their work so that we might someday curb the need for this grim civic duty. And they get the final word on this subject tonight.
My fear was to be here where I am today. But at the same time, I have this feeling, because I know that was an injustice, what I saw, and I want to come forward.
I didn't do it for pity. I didn't do it for fame. I did it so that the world knows that these police are not here to protect and serve us. They are here to assassinate us. They are here to kill us because we are black. I posted a video last night and it just went viral. And everybody gasped. How do I feel? I don't know how to feel. And I just see him on the ground. I'm like, what is going on? I pull my camera out. And they killed this man. And I was like 5 feet away. And it's so traumatizing.
You can't get
protected your money.
Eric, Vanessa, and Aaron, weekday mornings on Dakota News Now. After the songs you love, the new 97.3 KKRC, Sioux Falls' greatest hits with Ben and Patty in the morning. The new 97.3 KKRC, where all the good songs have gone. Sioux Falls' greatest hits from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The new 97.3 KKRC. Listen.
It's here. Get huge savings from 20